In 1995, Governor Pete Wilson tested the waters for the so-called Civil Rights Initiative. He and the California Board of Regents rescinded all affirmative action programs in the University of California system.
There's a number of really great and important lessons from the 1990s that we can make use of today. Proposition 209 was a 1996 ballot measure in California that proposed to eliminate all race and gender-based public affirmative action. The sponsors of it ultimately named it the California Civil Rights Initiative, and that certainly deceived a section of voters.
It seems as though they're using that name to fool people into thinking that it is something to do with civil rights.
The California Civil Rights Initiative, you hear the name and you say, civil rights.
The same dynamics are at work today about the ways that the language of rights, the ethical bearing and promise of civil rights is now increasingly being incorporated by figures from across the political spectrum. So not just the liberal civil rights movement as we understand it, but actually also figures very far on the right. The very definition of who benefits, who wins, what civil rights was for, is itself under attack today.
Affirmative action is one of the most, there's so many misconceptions about it. You'll ask somebody, you're like, are you pro-affirmative action? And they'll be like, no. Then you'll say, well, aren't you for equal access to the university and aren't you for equal opportunity? They'll be like, well, yeah, well, what do you think affirmative action is?
Both Proposition 209 and 202, all of them came on the heels of what was called at the time the culture wars in the late 1980s and early 1990s. So there were struggles over curriculum, struggles over really what higher education and public education was for, who controlled it, etc. I think there was some deception for some people in terms of what the measure promised. In another sense, underlying this was a proposition that if we somehow eliminated or reduced access to people who had been historically marginalized in the system itself would kind of be rebooted and recover.
Not since the New Deal have Americans so passionately questioned the role of the individual in society, the responsibilities a government has to its people, and the nature of democracy itself. Affirmative action, civil rights, religious freedom, and censorship are some issues now at the center of the national debate.
I mean, this is a critical question. How do the conditions of the 1990s that in many ways facilitated and produced these efforts compare to the climate we're facing today? In the 1990s, this is just after the Cold War ends, the economy is generally expanding. There's still more optimism, I think, in the kind of bread and butter democratic institutions. I think today we have much more a deeper sense of crisis. While we are seeing a return of affirmative action debates over religious freedom, LGBT rights on the one hand, on the other, the stakes seem much higher. And I think that makes actually these conflicts even more important.
Because we all have a stake in the debate's outcome, our ability to voice informed opinions is critical. After all, a democracy, by definition, cannot work unless all members of our society are free to participate and then actually get involved in the political process affecting their lives.
The group Californians for Justice, which was formed around the Anti-Affirmative Action Initiative, we see the painstaking work of talking to voters at shopping centers, malls, public places about what was at stake at the initiative, inviting them to take individual action. And there's no substitution for the one-on-one conversations, the building of organization, the getting people to talk about shared ideas and possibilities.
It's leaflets, it's discussions, it's calling your friend and asking them, how do you feel about this issue? That personal contact. There's no way we're going to ever come up with social change if we don't invest our personal time and our personal, experiences with each other.
That actually had a tremendous effect, not only in almost swaying that election, but really building a certain kind of majority in California today that has a much more broad-minded and less cynical view of politics, of the role of government in general. We knew in the 90s, working on these initiatives, that we were going to be outspent, that we didn't have the organizations in place at the time to respond effectively, that there were deep fissures in terms of different racialized communities, but we were united by some possibility that it didn't have to be this way, that we could together imagine some other way the state could come together, could build institutions and build possibility.
With the social responsibility, there's a greater good, and not just our personal success and our individual success, but for all of us.
I learned so much from that about keeping a certain kind of cynicism at bay and understanding that the day-to-day work of grassroots organizing could matter deeply. There's no more important lesson for me to return to in this moment than what happened there.
Working, talking in the night.